Hello, everyone. Good morning. It's another great day. Hope you are excited about learning how or the process of Sashiko. I hope I am pronouncing that correct. And again, if you have any questions during the presentation, be sure to write them in the comment or chat box. I will, at least at the end for sure, go through and check and make sure that I get what you need answered. So anyway, please put your comments and add anything to it, because I know many of you may already know quite a bit about this. So again, good morning. And I see people are coming in, so that's great. And I see Joanne, Marcia, and Marty. Good. So Sashiko, for what it is a form of stitching, and it comes from Japan. What I understand about the whole process of Sashiko is that it was started to repair clothing by farmers and fishermen, and their wives would put a piece of cloth over, a tear, a hole, or worn fabric on their clothing and stitch another piece down. There are a couple of reasons for this. It reinforced the fabric and made it stronger, and that way the clothes is going to last longer. And as time went on, as they were sewing these pieces of fabric together, they, as any creative person does, started to, add the stitch, a very simple stitch, making it beautiful by putting it into patterns. And it's a beautiful artwork. It really is an art form, and it's absolutely beautiful. And so today I want to talk about what you need to get started doing Sashiko. It's very simple. There's not much that you need to do this, and the process of doing it, and how different people tackle the whole process of stitching in this Japanese art style. So with that in mind, good morning, everyone. Good to see so many of you here, and the fact that you are putting up and saying hello from everywhere. I hope that everybody sees that, and please feel free to keep doing that. Love to see where you're from, recognize names. I feel like we've become old friends. So let's go down to the table and let's talk about the things that we need to do Sashiko. I started a piece. This comes from a kit for a pillow, and so the lines are already marked, but I do want to talk through the process. First things first, though, what you need to do Sashiko is thread, a needle, a scissors to cut your thread, and a loosely woven cloth. This one is actually the cloth that they use in Japan. It's a deep navy blue, and I don't know if you can see, but you can see my fingers through the fabric, so you can certainly see that it is loosely woven. But linen, cotton, anything will work to do that. The thread I want to talk about, true Sashiko thread is very thick. This is quite a thick piece of thread, and it's almost always matte. It comes in different colors. You can also get a non-matte finish to it. This one is a cream colored that I'm using here today, but you can also get it in white and a number of other colors of thread. And it's absolutely beautiful. Traditionally, it was these neutral colors. I'm going to call it neutral, but like navy blue, the grays, the taupes, that type of fabric that was used on the clothing for the fishermen and the farmers in Japan. And the thread was often white, but they've changed, we've changed, and we have many colors for this. It's a very thick thread. I would recommend using the Sashiko thread. It works really well, and I'm going to talk a little bit about putting it on a needle and keeping it flat as you work through this. And you double this thread. Traditionally, and from the Japanese, they double the thread. Now, I do know that some do not double the thread, and I think it's a matter of preference of how you want your finished product to look, if whether or not you double that, because I've seen it both ways. And I talked to a good friend who is from Japan, and she was the one who shared with me that this thread is doubled usually. So that is the thread, but you could also use pearl cotton. A pearl 8 or a 12 is a little bit finer and thinner than the 8. But those both work too. You can also use cotton embroidery thread. I think number 12 is probably your best bet to get the same depth of thickness, if you will. And I don't know if depth is the right word. Then the other thing that you will need is a Sashiko needle. And you can purchase these most any place, especially in a place where they sell, needles and Sashiko thread. The thread here and the needles are of Cosmo. And this one comes in a package of about 6, I think, was in this package. And they come in either long, medium, or short. I'm using one of the shorter ones today to show you. The long ones are really good if you have straight line, and that's really not showing up real well on camera. I'm sorry about that. The extra long ones are for straight stitching. If you have straight lines and the shapes are all, there's no curves in your lines. The shorter ones make it a little bit easier to go around the curves if you're doing circles or any, bends, anything in your fabric. Like this one, I'm using a shorter needle because I did find that it worked a little bit easier as I went around the curves to get through that. So Sashiko needles, a scissors to cut your thread, and your fabric. Now, this one is from a kit that is already marked, and that makes it really easy, and it's a great way to start on your project because you can follow the lines and get the feel of the in and out of the fabric. But if you were going to draw your own, whatever pattern you can find, and there's plenty of Sashiko patterns out there, and you can draw your own and create those. And once you get the idea of the stitch into your head, it's very easy to do that on a straight line instead of a broken line like this pattern particularly has. The one thing that you need to remember though is that the top stitch that you see here is at least a third longer than the space in between each of the stitches. So as you're going, under and coming up into the next one, this is only you have more on the top of your needle than you do on the bottom of your needle. So your stitches are longer on the top and shorter in between. So that's primarily what you need to remember for that. Now I'd like to show you a little bit about threading your needle and getting your thread properly with these Sashiko needles. The eye is very large to accommodate that, and I kind of squish that end of the thread so I can get it in there. And of course, because you are all watching, I'm gonna have to, I squished it a little too much. All right, so I'm going to bring this down and get it to get it even with the other side. Bring that needle up and stretch it. Now, one of the things that I found, and I learned this also from my friend, was if you take and you rub your fingers down the full length of the thread, 4 or 5 times, it's going to take all that kink out. You won't get the twist in your thread, and then you can tie your knot at the end. And double up that knot and get it nice and thin in there. And when you have that completely done, another thing that you can do, which was kind of a neat trick that I also learned, was to hold this very taut and take your thumbs and flick on both ends of that. And that keeps that thread nice and flat as you're sewing through your fabric. So I'm going to come up here. You're going to have a double knot where I ended that. A little bit later when we come to that point, I'll show you. I use a weaver's or a loom knot to do that. So to join the ends so that I don't have, a double knot sitting on the back of my fabric. So now what happens is that I've come up through the fabric and I'm going to accordion it, or I'm making it pleated onto the needle. And watching an expert do this, they can get probably a whole line of this, threads onto one needle. I can't quite do that. But so I'm going to go down and I'm using my thumb to push, and I'm following those lines and I'm pleating those threads onto my needle. One of the things that I would like to, when I get to the end of this, we're going to talk a little bit about how do you decide where you're going to put your needle. And as you can see, going around the curve, that just a little bit smaller stitches help make that a little bit better going in there. Now I'm going to go down on that, and because this is thick thread, I don't know if in embroidery you have yank the needle through when it's there, but if you just slide that thread back into the fabric, you can but I slid my needle out, so let me just make those couple stitches again. All right, but if you slide the thread back, the needle goes through. And by doing that at the beginning, my stitches, doing multiple stitches at a time, keeps your thread flat. And now we've got this scrunched up kind of mess here, and this is where you take, and you can actually handle this pretty solidly. And you're going to pull those threads out so that they're nice and flat. So I finished up that section right there. One of the other things that are important about Sashiko is to try to look at your pattern and find a method or a way to get as far as you can without having to stop and rethread your needle over and over again. So when I was looking at this pattern and starting it, I noticed that if I started in one corner and I worked my way all the way to this end down here, then I could start and go back in the opposite direction, and I could get a full line going up and back. And when I go to the next row, and each of these has a row all the way across, and each row comes with a little less of these oval shapes to it. So I did one so it would cross so you could see what it was doing. This one goes in this direction, these go in this direction, and once I have those done, then I'm done with my piece. And it does go, as you saw, pretty quickly through that. So you want to, make an assessment of your pattern prior to starting your stitching to see how best to stitch it and how much further to get. So now I've come to the end of this row. Where am I going to go? Do I knot it off here? And the answer is yes, you could knot it off. But often what happens is that they'll just bring this thread down to the next row. And now I'm going to, because I'm going the opposite direction, I need to turn it this way. And they'll just bring the thread down to the next point of entry and leave that strip on the back side. Okay? And so that is, that certainly is one way that you could do this. And I came up in the wrong place for that next one. So I'm simply going to take my needle back through the same hole that I came up in and get to the right one this time. All right. So again, I come up, make sure that that is, let me get these pins out of the way, nice and flat on the back. I am going to scrunch up my fabric in the direction that I need to go. And again, I'm going down, longer stitch, smaller stitch, and I'm pushing it on with my thumb. And again, my stitches on the top are a little over a third bit longer than my bottom. Now when I come to an intersection, one of the things that I need to remember here is that I want to finish here, and I'm going in a curved direction. So I want to come up on the other side, and I want to keep these stitches really straight, because one of the things about Japanese Sashiko stitching is that, and again, I pull back so that the thread comes into the fabric. So you can just pull it back, and that way the thread just moves right through. And by doing, again, multiple stitches, you're keeping your thread nice and flat. But I want to talk about intersections like right here. Where you have an opening, you want to make sure that your stitch ends going under. You come back up on the other side, because you want to leave that opening free so that your threads aren't crossing and creating a lump in the center of your pattern. So again, down, coming up, going down. The other thing that I noticed when I was doing the first one, I did something that dulled my needle. And the one thing that I did notice about the Sashiko needle was that when it gets a burr or something in it, it catches on this fabric and it starts to pull the threads in the fabric. So you want to make sure to keep your needle nice and sharp. And if it does get dull or does get a little burr at the end of it, to change out your needle and get a new one. And work. They are very sharp. They go through the thread really nicely. And again, I'm going to get that started by pulling the thread back. Just keeps that nice. And again, when you have that scrunch, you are pulling that through, and you're getting that nice finish to that. I want to get to an ending because I'll show you the weaver's knot. It's not one I use often, and so I have to really think through how to do it. But once you get the idea of the weaver's knot down, it's a great ending and starting because you only have one knot. You don't have to knot the first one to start another stitch. And you know, over time this becomes very much of a, I'm guessing that it feels a little bit like getting the groove when your hands quilting. You kind of get a rhythm going, and you can start moving pretty quickly through your stitches. And again, I don't take a ton of stitches. So again, I'm going underneath across that and leaving that center open. Let me see if anybody. And for those of you who would like to give this a try, they do make beautiful, beautiful pillows and artwork for your walls. A great gift for a friend. It would make a great, you know, a zipper purse, anything, you know, like that. And again, if you can't find, you know, the actual Sashiko fabrics, or the Japanese fabric, linen and, you know, a loose weave, cotton, anything like that would work. Yeah, beautiful patterns on you know, out there that you can find, that you, or come up with your own, you know, create your own patterns for that. All right, let's see how close we are. I think I'm getting pretty close to the end of my thread. Yeah, I think I'm going to leave it a little bit longer so that you can see a little bit easier what I'm doing with the weaving knot. So let's pull this through to the back side. I cut that, and I'm going to leave this there. Now, there's several different ways that you can start this. One of them is you can take, when you start to stitch, you can take 2 or 3 stitches, and then you would go, once you got 3 stitches up, then you would go back through those stitches. The one thing with that I noticed is that your first 3 or 2 or 3 stitches that you do at the beginning of a row are very thick. And that's because you weave on the back side. You weave in and out, and you can finish that way too. And for most of us that are probably would do this decoratively, that's a great way to go. How you know, start and finish your embroidery. They knotted in Japan, and like I said, they used a weaver's or a loom type knot, because the more you pull on it, the more stress that becomes on it, the tighter the knot gets. And you know, now it's just as easy to tie knots, and as you can see, that's pretty much what I've done throughout the back of it. So those are 2 different ways that you can do that. But if you wanted to start another one with only you know, the thread and 1 knot on the back, you're going to thread your needle again, and I love these needles because the eye is big enough to hold that. And I'm going to get these even. And again, I'm going to take my thumb and forefingers and slide that down to get all the kinks out, to keep the threads straight coming in so that they don't twist. I'm going to hold it taut again, and with my thumbs I'm going to give it that now, bear with me on this weaver's knot. You have the end of your thread, and usually you can go down to about that far. I'm leaving it extra long so you can kind of see what I'm doing. Then this one gets laying to the right of that thread. I'm going to hold it with my forefinger and my fingers underneath. I'm going to hold this one with my thumb, and then get that tightly under there. Then this one gets brought over here. I'm going to keep my thumb there. This comes around. I'm going to bring my thumb over so it stays put. The thread goes under the top side, over this way. I need to hold on tightly to that. Then this, I'm going to lift my thumb, bring it down, put my thumb under the circle, and grab a hold of that thread that I brought back, and then keeping this tight, because if you don't hold on to that, your knot just comes out. And then I'm just going to pull my thread, and I have this very flat weaver's knot. Okay, so then I can straighten that back out. I'm going to cut these ends off that I left pretty long. And then I can continue with my next row. And now I only have one knot on the back side. So with one very flat, and I don't know that the camera really shows you, but that knot lays very flat because it's kind of I would say it almost looks like it's a little square knot, but it lies very, very flat on the back of your fabric. So that's another way how you can finish that. So let me just kind of go through a little bit of this, making sure that I didn't forget anything. Sashiko thread, Sashiko needles, your pattern, if you draw it using tracing paper, tracing paper works really well on that, and you can create your own pattern. You can buy a kit like this, and the quilt shop has them. The quilt show, you can purchase them there, and I'm sure that somewhere on there Kristen or John has put up a link so that you can purchase these from the Quilt Show store if you wish to get started if you've never done this before. And yes, I just saw it going up with the Restream reply up there, so you can use that. So this is the basics of Sashiko. It's quite beautiful, and your fabrics again are Japanese fabrics or a loose weave cotton or linen works great, and Sashiko thread or pearl 8 or 12. Cotton embroidery, I would say number 12 works really well, and you can use multiple strands of that to work this through. It's very relaxing, it's very fun, and it's rather addicting. So I hope that you will give it a shot. Try it out. Find out whether or not this is your cup of tea. But I know that just those, I wanted to keep going as I prepared this particular pattern for today, because it is addicting and it's fun, and I can sit and watch a television show with my husband and work through this, and I could probably I would have had this whole pillow done in that one evening that we sat there together. But, you know, I needed to share it with all of you. So let me go back, make sure if you have any questions. Let me see what's going on. We've got people from everywhere. Welcome. I'm so glad all of you are here. I'm not seeing too many questions, which is good. And again, it says shop for Sashiko goodies in the store, and there's a link right on there. Sherry has put a comment up there that she follows someone on YouTube, and it is about the thread. It really is. If you use like a pearl cotton, it's going to come out shiny and it's beautiful. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But the true thread for that is matte thread. But she says he only uses a single layer of thread, and that's fine. It's really about how you like it to look. There's no fast and all right. And the needle again is, this particular brand is Cosmo, and it is a Sashiko needle, and the name of it is, and I do not know how to pronounce it, but it's spelled Hidamari, Hidamari Sashiko needles, and they're from Cosmo. So that's the needle that the shop is carrying. And somebody else mentioned that this is how they do big stitch quilting. And yes, it pretty much is about the exact same stitch. And I did not mention that, but Trudy did, that if you cut your thread at an angle, it goes through the eye of the needle really well. And that is very true with any thread and any needle that you are working with. And did I make a knot at the beginning? Yes, I did. I knotted it for the first time when I started, and then when I needed to add more thread is when I did the weaver's knot. But you don't have to do that knot at all. You can tie it off and knot it, and then start another line with another knot, and you will have two knots side by side on the back, which is not a problem. It doesn't affect the work. It doesn't affect how it looks on the top. So either way that you want to do it, I wanted to share with you the three methods. One is that you take your thread and not knot it at all and weave it back through a couple of stitches, and when you start, you take 2 or 3 stitches and then weave backwards and then start again. The only thing there is that your first 2 or 3 stitches are thicker and it looks a little bit wider, but once you finish the piece, it's hardly noticeable at all, or a knot, or you can continue another thread with the loom knot or weaver's knot if you are into finishing ideas with that. Is you can frame them. They look beautiful on a wall with the intricate patterns that some of them are, and even the very simplest ones of patterns are absolutely gorgeous framed and hung. You can make pillows, you can do table runners, embellish clothing, children's clothing, whatever. There's many, whatever your mind or your imagination can come up with, you certainly can do to use this stitch and to use these patterns. And again, it is very similar to what we do when we do the long stitch quilting. And contrasting colors are very effective, and they really are. I agree with you. That was from Kay. And doing the double threads and all that, I agree with that. So I think I've got most of the questions answered for you. And again, the thread does not have to be doubled. That was the method that my friend suggested that she used in Japan, but I also know from reading material on it for today that a single thread works perfectly well, and many do it that way. I kind of like the double thread because I tried it both ways at first. The double thread just gives it a little bit more drama. It's a little bit more dramatic, and I really kind of like that. So and it's all about the thread. So use whatever colors, use whatever style. I truly liked the matte finish for this particular product that the true Sashiko thread gives you, and that rubbing it, 4 or 5 times took all the kinks out of it. And I think I'm going to even try that when I do some of my embroidery, because I always get that winding. And if that little trick works for this, maybe it'll work for that. So have a wonderful week. We're going to be working on how to use up some of your charm packs for next time. We have 2 great little patterns that we're going to be working with to use up those charm packs. So we will see you next week. Have an absolute blessed and wonderful, joy-filled week, and I'll see you next time. Bye.